This video contains elements that are not suitable for children under the age of 14. Viewer discretion is advised.
Before we discuss Series 10 proper, we're going to start this episode off several years earlier, in 1999. When Thomas and the Magic Railroad entered production, there were screen tests in Toronto, Canada, using the models in their Series 5 conditions being performed. The original glossy liveries would not have held up on the big screen, and so newer brass models of Thomas and Percy would be made for the film. Because they would be subject to intense use during filming, they needed to be in top condition since the original models have been given so many repairs over the years that the crew was concerned about these imperfections being visible on the big screen. As Series 6 was being filmed, the original brass chassis for the models were replaced with brand new CNC machined aluminum ones and would become the standard for new models all the way up to the end of the model era. Which brings me on to Series 10. By the time production had started, the original Perspex models were over 20 years old, having been in near constant use since the early 1980s. Because schedules were tight and there was little room for emergency repairs at this point, Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James, and Percy would each have 2 new brass models built, with Thomas himself having around 5 models by 2008. Toby would not receive a new model until the 12th series, and as Emily had been introduced in 2003, it is unlikely that she received a new model. The Thomas Tank Merch blog goes into fuller detail about the subtle differences between the original models and the newer ones. However, every once in a while, an older model would be utilized for filming for stunts in case the new brass models were damaged. For example, in the Green Controller, James's original Perspex model was repainted into the yellow and black B livery rather than using the new brass model. In Thomas and Skarloey's Big Day Out, Skarloey's small-scale model was used for the first time since Series 5, ignoring stock footage from Series 7, to be used for long shots alongside Thomas's Gauge 1 model, as the large-scale model would have looked too big alongside Thomas. This model has been preserved by the aforementioned Thomas Tank Merch, alongside Sir Handel, Rusty, and Duke, as well as James and Edward's original Perspex models. Peter Sam's original model has since been bought by an unknown buyer, and who knows if Rheneas and Duncan will pop up in the future. Save for Series 10 and the pack, 2006 was a fairly quiet year for Thomas and Friends. All 28 episodes of Series 10 had aired in the United Kingdom across 2 weeks, between October 2nd and 15th. And that was pretty much it as far as new content was concerned. And no, the 28 episodes bit wasn't a typo. Series 10 was the first to deviate for the usual 26 episodes, presumably to celebrate the milestone of double digits. But frankly, looking back, they should have stuck with 26 episodes and removed 2 episodes. I would have gotten rid of Topped Off Thomas and Thomas's Frosty Friend, 2 of the most stupid, brainless episodes of the entire show, as they're literally 7 minutes of nothing of substance happening. There is a third I probably would have cut as well, but a character introduced in that episode appeared in later series, and we'll get to that soon enough. It didn't really help much that Thomas appeared in every episode with the exception of Duncan Drops a Clanger, making Series 10 the one where Thomas appears in the most episodes with the exception of Series 20. For the narrow gauge episodes, a wharf was introduced as another location for the Skarloey engines to interact with the standard gauge engines, or at least Thomas and James, the latter of whom was given a gauge-free model so he could interact with Skarloey and co. While Thomas's model looked fine, James's model just looked off, mostly the lamp irons and his confused face. Seriously, just freaks the fuck out of me. And his middle lamp iron looks like it's poking his chin. James's gauge-free model just looks ugly on the front. A large-scale model for Bulstrode was also considered for the set of the wharf, but because of budget constraints, the idea was dropped, forever leaving him a one-off character. Yet that didn't stop him from appearing in merchandise or books. However, we did get the return of Sir Handel, finally, to complete the Skarloey 6. The reason we haven't seen him until then was because he was working at the Skarloey Slate Quarry, which is weird since we've never seen him in scenes that take place there like Duncan. Not only that, Sir Handel was given a change in attitude, like doing his jobs without complaining, and even became wiser in most situations. Strangely, it was as if Sir Handel had become a gender-flipped Emily in reverse. Oh, and somehow he knows Fearless Freddy before Skarloey and Rheneas did. Your guess is as good as mine. What the? I wasn't expecting anyone.
Oh, hello, Zack. Oh, you're doing Sodorama, I see. How's it going?
Pretty good. I was just talking about Series 10, and I guess you want to say your 2 cents on Sir Handel?
Of course. I mean, if that's okay with you.
Sure, go for it.
Thanks! Okay, so, for those of you who aren't in the know, I've been perfecting my Skarloey Railway story arcs for quite a few years now, and one major player in the arc is Sir Handel. I've been disappointed with certain aspects of the way he was presented in the books. He doesn't seem to learn his lessons very well. In Old Faithful, he learns to be kind to the old coaches, but in Mountain Engine, he's calling them cattle trucks again. And he doesn't even react to his mentor supposedly being scrapped in the story Duck and Jukes either. I mean, come on! Was Audrey even trying to make him a part of that plot? I'm very surprised not many fans have attempted to correct this mistake. So, in season 10, when I saw him being a more kind and hardworking engine, this was a refreshing change. A bit abrupt? Well, kinda, but seeing him having positive interactions with the other engines, especially Peter Sam, left me with a warm feeling. I personally think if they mashed up the Railway series season 4 Sahandel with what we see of him in season 10 onward, Sahandel would have been very close to being my favorite character on the show. And we actually do get hints of Sahandel's cheekier side in season 20, I believe.
Are you sure you're saving time there, Samson?
Well, once I get going, you won't believe how fast I can be.
You're right! I won't!
Neither will I, Samson! Good luck!
Thanks for the insight, Rachel. Now, I guess Peter Sam would still be your favorite character regardless of making Sir Handel a more well-rounded character.
Very funny, Zach. I'd better go before I start rambling on about my headcanons about Freddy and Ivo Hugh. Catch you on the flip side.
Right, so anyway, let's get down onto the newbies for Series 10, shall we? Freddy is probably the least interesting out of him, and rewatching his debut episode, he practically rewrites a lot of the Skarloey Railway's history. But even if we take that out of the equation, his personality added nothing new to the railway. You've already got Skarloey and Renee's for being brave, wise engines, plus Duke if he appeared back then, Peter Sam being a cheeky scamp, and if you want a number 7 for the railway, Ivo Hugh from the Railway series, who was literally a blank slate. Back in 2011, or was it 2012? I don't remember. I remember there being a rumor that Freddy would reappear in the CGI series and that he'd be voiced by Bob Golding, and while Bob would later go on to voice the likes of Steven and Sydney, Freddy did not reappear in the show, with Series 12 being his last appearance to date, and hopefully it'll stay that way as, like Neville before him, Freddy didn't contribute anything to the series, so what's the point? The next newbie on the list, Jeremy the Jet Plane, did appear in the CGI series, or at least a merchandise promo of him. In a brief sequence in Letters to Santa, you can see his Trackmaster toy. While he didn't have much in terms of personality, I liked how, along with the Sodor Airport, they tried modernizing other aspects of Sodor like the Railway series did, so why not bring the airport back along with Jeremy? With that being said though, he could use a redesign. Those eyes on the windshield just look plain wrong, almost like something out of Cars or, more fittingly, Disney's Planes. Next up, there's Rosie, who back then was painted lavender. If you want to make Rosie a tomboy character, then why was she painted lavender, which is a stereotypical girly color? That is the complete antithesis of what a tomboy is supposed to be. In her debut story, Rosie just comes off as a creepy stalker, which was not the start they should have gone with her, especially since she was introduced with no explanation as to how or why she got there. In real life, the USA dock tank superseded the E2s at Southampton docks from the 1940s to 1960s, and that could have made for some interesting storytelling. What if Thomas had been resentful towards Rosie upon first meeting because her siblings replaced his own, even though she had nothing to do with it? That way, both sides could be sympathized with, but in the end, Thomas realizes that you shouldn't just judge someone for what they are and they become friends. That would have been a much better introduction to Rosie than just making her a stalker in their debut story, and then doing little to nothing with her after that, even though she would eventually get a revamp in 2017, but even then, they'd done little with her since, save for one episode in Series 22. It is a shame because there is so much you could have done with Rosie before and after her revamp. I've seen a fair amount of fan content that at least tried to make some use of her, and heck, I've even had a few ideas myself on what to do with Rosie for my own headcanon for this series. As much as I find Thomas in the Birthday Mail to be a bad episode, it is nothing compared to the debut episode of Rocky the Crane, the infamous Edward Strikes Out. Why is it infamous? Well...
That crane might be big, Gordon sniffed, but he has no engine. He can't move unless another engine pulls him. Then I don't think he can be really useful, chuffed Edward slowly. Quite right, Edward, huffed Gordon. He will only get in the way.
That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why Edward leaving the Steam team in Series 21, even though it should have been abolished by then, was a good thing for him. Throughout Series 8 to 16, Edward was constantly given starring roles even when they didn't fit him, but Edward Strikes Out is the worst offender of the lot. It is the complete antithesis to Edward as a character. This is the same engine who stood by Duck's side when Diesel spread lies about him out of petty revenge, served as a mentor figure to smaller engines like Thomas and Percy, saved Trevor from scrap, saved James from potentially crashing, helped Gordon up his own hill, and got passengers home despite being crippled. Edward may be engine number 2, but he is number 1 to the hearts of so many fans, and for good reason. There is nothing more sickening than just seeing him outright bully Rocky like he did, except maybe a later episode from Series 15 which we'll get to, even going so far as to call him newfangled nonsense to his face. Yes, Gordon may have been an influence on Edward, but it was Edward himself who also acted rude to Rocky of his own volition. There is no way you can redeem this episode after such a horrifying scene like that. Not only that, this episode is something that Rocky as a character will never live down, because this is his introductory episode, and almost makes it canon as much as I wish it weren't, especially since Edward's had far better roles before and since. Okay, granted, he did have a few slip-ups before this episode.
He doesn't even look like an engine, said Edward.
And afterward.
I'm not setting one wheel out there in the dark.
But there were minor moments that could have easily been fixed. Edward Strikes Out would need a complete rewrite from the ground up in order to make better sense, but as it stands, it'll forever be remembered as the episode that destroyed Edward's character before Andrew Brenner took the reins as head writer. It also likely cemented Sharon Miller's growing negative reputation among older fans, and remains one of the darkest marks she has yet to shake. What else can be said about Rocky? Well, for the CGI series up until Series 20, he virtually replaced the breakdown train, which is neither practical nor economical. Why would anyone think of replacing 2 cranes with just 1? My Little Pony's last season did something similar with Twilight Sparkle, a princess who's already got too much time on her hooves as it is, not to mention certain behavioral issues in the past, taking over for Celestia and Luna. It was a terrible, ill-suited idea if it didn't have any degree of sense or logic behind it. It was quite possibly the worst idea the show had ever come up with.
That was unexpected.
Okay, make that second worst idea. But I'm not through with that one yet. What's that got to do with Rocky? Long and short, replacing 2 of something with 1 of that same something does not work no matter which way you slice it. If it didn't work for My Little Pony or Thomas and Friends until Series 20, then what chance does it have working at all? I would talk about Rocky's personality next, but there's very little to it. He's had more screen time than Rosie, and yet he doesn't show much in terms of character, which is actually kind of pathetic, since Rosie's always had a chance to show what she could do, while half the time, Rocky just seems shoehorned when it could have also used Judy and Jerome. Well, that rant went on a bit longer than I thought, and now that I think about it, that was all really messed up what they did back then. Any other highlights I could mention? Well, we did have the Chinese dragon reappearing in Percy and the Fun Fair, Duck got a cameo in the navigation music video, and It's Good to Be Gordon was really great, but that's pretty much all I could think of. For the airings of Series 10 on television, a new segment called Sodor Special Places was featured, which would involve a location on Sodor such as Nappert Station, Gordon's Hill, Tidmouth Sheds, and Brendam Docks. This was followed up in Series 11 with Fun Times with Our Friends, and then in Series 12 with Thomas's Favorite Friends, each featuring recaps of episodes from Series 8 to 10, focusing on a specific character or group of characters in the question. On the whole, Season 10 was bad. It's the first series thus far that I've ranked 3 episodes as atrocious, and they really sank the whole ship. If you took out Topped Off Thomas and Thomas's frosty friend, then this series would just be mediocre at best. But as it is, it's aged like milk in the sun, and the models beginning to show their age didn't really help much. It's a real slog to sit through, save for a few gems. Mind you, for the next few years, at least in terms of episode quality, it was about to get much worse. Again.
Rocket!